Hi, everybody. It's Alex Jarett again with Technology Executives Club. I'm really excited to have Anaf Durrani here, who's currently the VP of Engineering at Grainger, which is probably one of the coolest companies in this area. Hi, Anaf. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Alex. How are you?
Great. You know what? I don't think I ever told you. I love Grainger. I think it is cool. I used to look at the catalog and online the website just for fun. I met someone who worked there. I never told you this, but I met someone who worked there like 20 years ago, and I was like, God, they do some really cool stuff there. This whole huge catalog. Anyways, I'm here with Anuf again, and I'm really excited, Anuf, that you joined our board of advisors, and so this is our official board of advisors interview. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the welcome.
Yeah, happy to have you here. So let's just real quickly, what we like to do in this first part is kind of go over your background, how it led you to here, because I think for people, part of this is mentoring, seeing how other people did it, what their path was, and lessons learned is kind of interesting. You went to DePaul and you were trained to be in computer science. I see you got a BS in computer science, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I wanted to be an engineer, kind of dabble between different majors, computer engineering, computer science, and then, ended up with computer science.
But then
Just
you got a master's in engineering later.
yes, I did. After I graduated, started working, I went back and did my master's in engineering. Yeah.
That's interesting. Help me out here. What's the difference?
Well, um, the way that the curriculum was, it was different in that what we did in computer science was it's a lot
Yeah,
of foundational computation, learning how to solve problems,
yeah,
and that's why if you think about computer science, you need a lot of math, right?
yeah.
And you dabble a bit into science and whether it's physics or chemistry, but a lot of it was math, and there was some foundational programming that you needed to learn. When we got into my master's, which was more software engineering, it was how do you build a system, right? How do you think about a system and how it comes together? What
Got
are the
it.
bits in the parts of that system? But then also, how do you commercialize it, right? How do you make sure that it's ready for an enterprise or ready for production? And so that was a big
Interesting.
difference between the two. And we did go into a bit more deep in terms of different theories and approaches to engineering, which helped me round out my perspective of the difference, let's say, between a developer and an engineer. Software engineer versus being a developer are two different things. So that helped.
Could help me
Yeah.
with that because I find this fascinating. I've never learned this before. So you're a software engineer by training and by trade. And what is the difference between like a developer and an engineer?
Yeah, I mean, we can debate this. I'm sure there's many out there that would want to debate this, but in my
Yeah,
in my opinion, my perspective, a developer's a type of individual who thinks about their code, right? The
yeah,
application that they're building or the piece of code that they're building, and not necessarily think about the broader set of disciplines that are required to build software. And that's where an engineer comes in. And
mhm,
I always talk to my team about, we are software engineers, we're not developers, right? The reason for that is because a software engineer needs to think about security, needs to think about quality, needs to think about the architecture and how the system comes together, and eventually how it will perform in production.
yeah.
And so I've always advocated for our associates, our engineers, being actually true software engineers. Today, you can consider them full stack. To me, it's all synonymous.
That's really interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that with me. The reason I spent a minute on that because I do believe that, I see a lot of people that are trying to kind of wing it more and everything, but I think you had that early foundation. If you just look at your career, how fast it may not have felt fast at the time to you, but if you look at it in retrospect, I mean, you were an IT consultant for a few years and then you jumped right to senior staff engineer at a great company, Motorola.
Uh, it provided me with a strong foundation,
That's
right?
what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, and growing up as an engineer in Motorola, it gave me the opportunity to. I mean, Motorola at the time was, if you think about it, right, it
Yeah.
was over 100,000, employees. We were at the time number two when you think about like mobile devices, right?
Yep.
The product that we were building was for Nextel at the time. It was called the push to talk walkie-talkie, where you press a button and you can talk to somebody instead of making a phone call. And what we did was my team's responsibility was to expand that out globally, where you can connect with folks between different markets, let's say Chicago and LA, but then also expand that across the globe and talk to people in Japan as another example. Press a button and
Wow.
talk to somebody.
As a
Yeah, so
walkie-talkie,
yeah,
not using, not renting someone's air time.
well, no, exactly. So it was a game changer, right?
Yeah,
And having a ton of senior engineers to work with, to learn from, was a big deal, right? And that set my foundation of what an engineer needs to be and what it has to be in order for us to, in order for us to build a system and build an application. That's where I think I call my default settings come from
yeah.
as an engineer, is through my time at Motorola.
That's really interesting to me because you really grew those roots there in your engineering background. And then you could see if somebody looks at your background, you shot right into up at Orbitz. You started off at global customer experience, but very quickly you became director product engineering, quality engineering, and customer experience for the whole company. And for those of you who don't use or remember, Orbitz is still very vibrant. It's a huge worldwide, if I say it right, travel site, right?
Yep.
And a lot of people used it as their back end. So I know that Orbitz is very big still. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah.
At Orbitz, the experience, I left engineering when I joined Orbitz. I don't know if that came out in the
Yeah.
description, but basically I wanted to do something very different and went into global customer experience, which was predominantly responsible for launching call centers, different parts of the world, but then also understanding how we can build a self-service oriented,
Interesting.
set of capabilities for our customers instead of them having to call customer service, right? Or email, or various forms of just interaction. And so what we did there was, my responsibility was to work with folks out of different geographical locations to either launch a call center or to ram down a call center, but then also look at and work with other parts of the organization to figure out what those self-service capabilities needed to be. So at the time, you think about like, hey, I want to cancel or modify a airline ticket or a hotel, right? And so, how do you do that, right? At the time, there was very primitive set of capabilities that existed, and so the teams that I was working with were building those capabilities and enhancing those capabilities for the customer. So you can say this was a precursor to a lot of the digital experiences that we talk about today, where you have an online and an offline experience coming together.
Yeah.
And so that was predominantly the work that I was doing, and the team that I was working with at Orbitz. And then at that point, I figured that it's probably time to get back into engineering, and so that's where the quality team, quality engineering came in, led the quality engineering team, transformed that team, and then decentralized it across our product development teams. That gave me the opportunity of moving into product development. And if you go to orbitz.com today, you do a hotel search, the results that come back, the promotions that are there, those were from the teams that I managed, right? They used to work with, they used to work with the business teams who worked with the hoteliers to pull in all the promotions. But then also we had digital coupons, and we managed a lot of the inventory that came in.
I know that experience is still awesome. I mean, we still use Orbitz here.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah. My wife loves it. I mean,
well, Expedia appreciates your business, I'm sure.
Yeah. So what's interesting about your journey, again, I keep coming back to that because I am very impressed, actually, but you then went from engineering, you said you took a break, but really what you did is you learned the business, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And you'll see this throughout my career, where I've weaved into different types of responsibilities, and I've gotten comfortable with taking on roles that I just may not have the depth of experience in, but the agility to just scale into those type of roles and get to the level of expertise and depth has been something that I'm feeling I would say I've conditioned myself to become more comfortable with, and that's been the case with every role that I've taken. It's always been something different. and that's helped me because just being open to change is a big deal, right? And being
Yes,
comfortable
it
with
is.
it is a big deal.
Yeah.
So not being afraid to learn something different has helped me in my career.
And that's a great insight. And what I'm hearing from you is that you're learning on the job, so you don't let your fear slow you down. You yes, you jump in and you learn on the job and you do it. That's great. That
Yeah.
shows a lot of confidence, which is
Well,
awesome.
I mean, and thank you, I appreciate that. What it also does is it allows me to take things that I've learned in the past, and although they may not apply 100%
Uh-huh.
back to the current responsibility that I have, but it gives
Yeah.
me a different perspective on how to solve problems and how to think about problems. And ultimately, if you just take, if you think about, I mean, anyone's career, right? It doesn't matter if it's mine or anyone's, but the common denominator is your interaction with people,
Mhm.
and how people react to certain things, to change, right? And what motivates people. And so that's
Mhm.
the other thing that I've learned is that being in different roles has given me perspective to understand how people actually behave and think.
Mhm. You're starting to talk about people, and the more I talk and do these interviews and talk to people, the more I've realized that the IT role, the CIO role, the head of development, product engineering role, it's really a people business that
Yep.
uses technology, that uses math, right? But it's still at the end of the day a people business. Is that?
Yeah, that I would say that's 100% true. It's a fact.
Yeah, yeah,
I was, I had the opportunity of visiting Microsoft's campus, and we were
yeah.
there for a business review. And one of the things that they had mentioned was they're trying to build an environment where people can learn, thrive, and grow. Basically, at the end of that, make a difference, right? And I've taken that on as well as
I
part of
like that.
just my interactions with my team. It's trying to understand what motivates them personally and professionally. Um, how can we build an environment for them so that they can, in fact, thrive, learn, grow, make a difference, right? And
Yeah,
that's different from maybe 5-10 years ago, where it's all about the output, right? And today
yeah.
it's more than the output. It's also about the person, right? So that's been a change in the way that I've been thinking about how we interact as leaders with people, and how we lead teams, right?
Another huge insight. We'll come back to that one because I think we'll
Yeah,
expand
sure.
on that in the lessons learned segment. So let me just wrap this segment, this part up, which is your background. So you jumped over to Cigna Insurance Company, DevOps, software defined. It says you support a hybrid multi-cloud environment. What was the big aha at Cigna? Because you were there, God, you were there for 7 years, so you did a lot there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the big aha,
Mhm.
or the what I learned at Cigna is that Cigna what's interesting about Cigna is it's a Fortune 12, um, many acquisitions, right?
Mhm.
And so there's many types of systems. You have all types of technology, and every as much as you think that problems can be solved the same way, they need to be solved differently, right?
Mm.
Right? And so a colleague of mine, when we went out to Thailand once on a business trip, he used to say to me, it's the saying in Thailand was same but different. It may be the same, right? The approach may be the same, but the implementation is a little bit different, right? And the way you execute, the way you solve those problems are a little bit different.
Interesting.
And being open to understand, or just being cognizant to understand that your approach needs to vary based on what you have in front of you, and the problems is just not people, right? It's also process and technology, right?
Mhm.
Bringing all of that together, right, and solving a problem might be a little bit different from problem to problem, and so, or from team to team, or from organization to organization. But the ultimate goal is the same, right? Our vision at Cigna was to improve the health and well-being and the peace of mind of those we serve, and that was our mission. But
Oh, I like that.
if you double click into that, right, and you can think about that mission, it's like a personal mission, right?
It's
It can
very
be
deep.
personal.
Yeah.
But if you double click in there, right, it's all about reducing, it's also about reducing the cost of healthcare. And the work that we did within DevOps, CI/CD, automation was really driving a means by which we can reduce the cost of healthcare, right?
Mhm.
And so a lot of lessons learned there, right? Different experiences with different types of teams, Even the acquisitions that we made, with Express Scripts at the time, very different culture coming in, interacting with them, knowing the fact that they're also smart people, right? But they think a little bit differently. So let's understand that,
Mhm.
and how do we bring the best of both worlds together? It was a work. It was a work in progress.
That's really cool. I love how you tied the mission to your role,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
pretty cool, and your team's role. And then we'll just wrap it up here. But you were a ticket master for a little bit, and folks, he jumped from director at Cigna to vice president of engineering. At Ticketmaster, which was a big move because Ticketmaster is worldwide. It's you. Everything you've been on for a while has been worldwide and pretty big, but in terms of impacting people. But then you jumped over to Grainger, obviously for the opportunity, because Grainger is such a cool, you had such a cool company. Now since November 2020, you've been VP of Product Engineering at Grainger. And tell me why you made the move to Grainger, what you do, and then what we'll do is once we finish that, we'll jump into the lessons learned. How's that?
Yeah, sure, sure. At the time at Ticketmaster, everything was shut down,
Yeah.
and there were a few things that were happening that I felt that it was probably best for me to look for another opportunity. And
Yeah.
at the time, Grainger had tapped me on the shoulder, and I just took the opportunity to have him take a phone call and then meet with our CTO, Johnny Leroy, who I felt that I can work with, and I can learn from. And we went through the process. I mean, I think ultimately, if you think about what Grainger is all about,
Yeah.
being one of the top companies, employers to work for, right? And you see this like award being granted over the past couple of years. And then you see diversity being a focal point. You see
Good.
focus on women in technology. All these different things come together, that makes Grainger a great place to work. But then beyond that, I found that there was alignment between leadership all the way down to the people like me who are trying to figure out what we need to do next. And
Yeah.
so that was another motivating factor. And every
That's
conversation
interesting.
that I had with folks that I brought in over the last 2 years, one of the things that I always point out is the fact that there is alignment between leadership and us, right? And that's a big deal if you really think about it. If you can get
Huge.
alignment with your leadership, even the board of directors, that yeah, we have to make progress and we have to change the way we work, and the way we do business, right? At the end of the day, that's what a digital transformation is.
Yes.
And that's a big deal, right? And so that was a motivation for me. That's been a motivation for a lot of folks that joined us afterwards as well.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who haven't looked at Grainger, go ahead and look at it. Like I said, I love hardware stores, and the fact that you're one of the biggest industrial supply company in the world, I could sit on that site for hours and just look at stuff and say I want that, and I would have no reason to have it.
Yeah.
Especially anything that has to do with a tractor, I think I would want. So I don't know why, but it's true. Anyways, I love this quote: changing the way we deliver business capabilities to the market, why we are the ones who get it done, why we strive to be the world leader in offering solutions that help businesses and institutions save time and money as they maintain, repair, and operate their facilities. It sounds like it's a really well-run company. I talked to a lot of folks. We'll talk about the roadmap. We're going to do the IT roadmap, right? And then the first stage of an IT roadmap is to understand what your company mission is, and then in the initiatives, and then you align what you're doing to those initiatives. And it sounds like that's all put together here. It sounds like when you say, okay, digital transformation, to make a statement like that, it's a big deal that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, it is. It is a big deal,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's just a testament to our senior leadership team. But if you have a conversation with our chief product officer, Brian Walker, he will talk about building a vision with the business. So in just driving that collaboration between a business and the engineering teams gives us an opportunity to make sure that we're solving the right problems. And from there, you build a roadmap, you start moving forward and starting to figure out what are the sequence of things that we want to build that continuously solves the problems that we need. And we work with the business to ensure that we are getting the value that we need.
That's great. I mean, like I said before, when I see a company that's well put together, and man, it's pretty impressive. You know, you're putting the mission on your LinkedIn profile, you talk it, pretty amazing. That's just a real testimony, not only to you and also to the company. Wow, your background is really awesome, Anaf. And what I find really interesting about that is you actually gave us a lot of the lessons learned while you were talking to us. For example, we talked about it being people being the business, and you talked about so far you're having a great career. What are some of those lessons learned?
Being comfortable with doing something different. That motivates me, right? And you can see that all throughout my career. It's been just varying degrees of experiences. Part of that, it all boils down to people, as I talked about before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where if you can understand people and how they work and what motivates them, then you can get what you want to get done. And that helps them as well, right?
Yeah.
That helps the team that you're working with. That helps the individuals that are on your team. But understanding them and what motivates them is pretty critical. And I guess the other thing, just lesson learned is that patterns repeat themselves. Right? If you think about any people problem that you have, it's always repeats itself. And so the key thing here is going to be that I've become more unfiltered in my feedback and being more direct, because I want to get to the point of making it tangible for the person that I'm having a conversation with. And so in the past, I've been more tactful and maybe have been a bit more filtered, right? So I'm becoming more unfiltered and just giving a very direct answer. And the only reason why I'm doing that is not because I want to rattle the individual, right, by any means, but it's more along the lines of making sure that the person understands that there is an outcome, there is a direction, there's a suggestion, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a pattern that we can follow. And so I wanted to get to that point so they understand there isn't any ambiguity in the way that I'm talking, or the way I'm relaying a direction, any kind of direction to anyone. So those are, I guess, the lessons learned for me or all throughout my career.
Some of the big ones. I find, one of the challenges that leaders have today is there's multi-generations working with you. My generation, I'll just say, I think I got a few years on you. You tell us what to do, we work hard, we just do it. And if you yell at us, we don't really care. All right, you yelled at us. I'm not offended by it. Just I'm not saying we like it.
Yeah.
But it's more top down, which came from the military. If you study these kind of models, and other generations, I would say the younger generations, they're much more, and I don't want to offend anybody watching who's younger, they're more sensitive. And it's like, I find myself, even with my own team or people working, you have to be much more attuned to that. Anaf, what is your take on that? Because how do you deal with that? First of all, do you agree with what I'm saying?
Well, the way I would categorize this is you have the multi-generational, set of characteristics.
Yeah.
Then you have macro culture, microculture characteristics. You have other demographics, that fall into line as well. Even if you think about this from a male-female point of view, right? There's different characteristics as well.
Yeah.
And it goes back to my point about understanding people.
Yeah.
And you have to sometimes get to that personal level and understand them, right? And have a conversation with them. But if you were to take a step back and abstract this a bit more, right, and zoom out a bit, ultimately, everyone has a story. Everyone has you got to figure out a way to empathize with folks. There's a level of sympathy that you have, but then there's a level of empathy that you have.
Yeah.
Empathy is really more connecting. It has a deeper connection. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've learned throughout the years in my career, is that even, you can say multi-generational, and actually I was, ironically at Grainger, they have this program, which I feel is great, is these resource groups. And one of the resource groups is multi-generational resource group, where what they do, one of their responsibilities is that they go out, they have this program where they would reverse mentor leaders, right? Where multi-generational, mentors and I'm the mentee basically. So they're mentoring me at the same time. So there's from different generations, and we're having conversations, and I'm asking them questions. Well, how do you think about this, or how should I be, considering that, right? And it was a good opportunity for me to learn and just be more sensitive to, and be more mindful of how people interact. And that's something that I think, as individuals, as leaders, right, we should just be, more aware and cognizant of it, because it makes us more effective as we interact with our teams and other folks and associates and team members across the company.
That's such a great answer. When I first look at your background, and don't look at your posts, and just look at this, I'm like, wow, this guy's like, computer science, engineering, whatever. He's very technical. And then I talk to you, and it's like you are really like Brene Brown would be proud of you. I just say that. You really are tuned into this whole thing, even when you speak about diversity and women in tech, and how you have to look at it from different perspectives. I just find that very admirable. I think if you and I were sitting at a desk and took the emotional EI test, I think you would beat me.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I would. I do have I've learned to be thoughtful.
Yeah.
It took some time. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And to make sure that I can manage, and be composed. That took some time for sure. That took a lot of hard work to get there. And part of that is just my back. Like, I'm first generation, born and raised in the United States, growing up in the United States.
Yeah.
I was confused, right? The reason why I was confused is because I have to deal with my culture, or the culture that we had at home, which was very different from the culture that we have at school as we grew up, or the culture that we had with our friends. If I would interact with family members, I think in English, but I have to speak a different language. And so the culture was a little bit different. And so my interactions were different. But when I would go outside and have conversations with my friends, it would be very different. And so growing up, you can say that I was a little confused and conflicted, because I didn't, and the way that our society was at the time, I wasn't accepted by either, right? And so a lot of that comes in me, where if I were to take an MBTI test right now, I'm a feeler, right? I feel things,
Really?
and I'm more sensitive to that.
Yeah.
And so, that's where the emotional intelligence comes in. That's where the perspectives comes in, where I need to think about things in different ways in order for me to come to a conclusion, right? And also understand people, right? And that helps me understand people, because I've gone through some experiences where others are feeling it for the first time, right? And they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is be self-aware so you can help others.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge lesson, man. I'll tell you, I'm going to go back and listen to this a couple of times, because you gave us so many great insights today. I'm really grateful for that. Can't wait to see you in one of our mentoring sessions. Part of this being on the board is helping people and being on the mentoring program. So in your chart, you say organizational change, modern engineering approaches, DevOps, cloud engineering leadership. Are those any of those topics, or what are some of the topics that really speak to you? Like these are 2 or 3 that I really like to help people with.
I would say organizational change will probably will bubble up. Again, it goes back to people.
Yeah.
It goes back to making sure that you can tell a story that ties back to a company mission or problem that you're trying to solve, or some North Star. And then how you can motivate people to be able to, solve those problems, right, through that change. An executive back at Motorola once said, when you have ambiguity, it leads to fear. And when you have fear, it leads to uneasiness, right? And that's sometimes, right? That's sometimes what we deal with when we have organizational change. And so how can we mitigate ambiguity? How can we mitigate that fear, right? To prevent the fear as much as we can. So it provides that clarity and focus for the team. And that is what makes me, gives me the motivation and passion, right? Basically, I'm pretty passionate about that.
Yeah, I can tell. That's such a great insight. What you're really dealing with is, I'm one of those rare birds that likes change, but I have found that for me, that's unusual. Like like people
Well,
around me, when there's change, I'm like, hey, this is great where things are changing. They're like, they get nervous, they get upset or whatever. And
I mean, as humans, we're creatures of habit,
yeah,
right? That's naturally how we are. We have our natural
yeah,
state, and sometimes when we're under stress, we go back to that natural state.
yeah,
And when we are in stress, like if you think about change, if you're driving, if you're going through some change, that's stressful for people. They tend to go back, and you feel like that's resistance, but it could be something else.
it could be something
And
deep. Yeah.
right, and so you have to recondition that mindset, right? And to get them across the bridge. And it's a matter of just understanding what the motivations are.
Which goes back to your earlier statement about
Yep.
empathy and sympathy and helping people what they want, how they're feeling, and then you can get what you want and what you need for the company and for the customers. So,
Yep.
wow, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you for being on the board. Thank you for doing this interview with us. It's great and sharing all these insights.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. Anytime. Anything you need, let me know.
Absolutely, we'll definitely be going on you. So,
Yep.
thank you.